Want to speak real English from your first lesson? Sign up for your free lifetime account at EnglishClass101.com.
Hi everybody, my name is Alicia. In this lesson, I'm going to talk about some expressions we use for rules in English. Some of this will be review, some of these will be some special phrases that we use almost always for rules and regulations. So let's get started. Okay, let's start with this first group up here of three expressions. The first one I think is a review point. We can use this as please or please do not. So we contract this do not to don't as well. Try to use this contracted form when possible. But we use this as kind of just like a basic request. So this is kind of the simplest, most basic way to express a rule or something you want someone to do or something you do not want someone to do. Some examples. Please remove your shoes. So here you see please is used before the verb remove. So please remove in this case. We follow it with a verb. Let's look at a negative example then. Please don't. Here I've used the reduced don't instead of do not. Do not is okay, but don't will sound a little more natural. Please don't feed the animals. So here, again, I have a verb following my expression. Please don't feed the animals. Feed means give food to. So please don't feed the animals. These are very common expressions that are kind of soft. They're more like requests in some cases. Okay, let's go on to the second one, also maybe a review point. Subjects, so we'll see this in the plural form, whatever the subject is, will be plural, must or must not. So as we saw with please, we can use this as a positive or a negative. So when we use must, it means something that the subject has to do. There's a requirement. On the other hand, using must not means it's something that the subject absolutely should not do, like it's illegal, or it's something that they need to make sure does not happen. Let's look at some examples of this. First, visitors must check in. Visitors must check in. So here I have my plural subject, visitors. So for example, visitors to a company or visitors to a museum. Visitors must check in. So here I have my verb. To check in somewhere is like to announce that you are there, to like meet at the reception. Here's another example in the negative though. Again, I have the plural form visitors, but this time must not. Be is my verb. Visitors must not be unattended. Unattended means alone or without an escort, without someone to help you somewhere. So we can use must to show something that like we're responsible to do and something that absolutely must not happen, something that we should not do. We use must not to talk about this. So if you like, you can check, I think we have videos on the channel about using must and must not. You can check those for some more information about must and must not. Okay. Let's go on to the next expression. This is kind of a set phrase, not so much a grammar pattern, but a set phrase. We ask that you please. We ask that you please. So here this we is like an organization. So you'll see this for like a company or maybe a hotel. We means like our group. So we ask, meaning a request from us, a request from our company, that you please. So again, we're putting this please here before some request. Let's look at an example. We ask that you please remain seated. So for example, on an airplane, we ask would be like the airplane staff or the company perhaps. We ask that you please remain seated. So this means, in other words, please stay in your seat. Please stay in your seat. So this makes it a little bit more formal, like a rule kind of, but it's phrased as a request. Okay, so let's go on to a couple more that are a little more complex. The first one is this expression, subject or subjects, is or are to, plus a verb. So we use this in more formal situations, actually, this is to or are to pattern. let's take a look at some examples. First, you are not to leave before the exam has finished. You are not to leave. So here we see subject you. You are not to plus our verb, not to leave. So this means don't leave, or you must not leave. This is the feeling here. We use this perhaps in like an examination, a test-taking situation, but it's quite formal. There are lots of rules. So you here means you the student, or you the test taker, or you the group of test takers as well. So this might appear on like an examination guideline sheet. Let's see one more example. Visitors are not to enter staff-only areas. So here we see the same thing. This time it's plural, visitors. Are not to enter is my verb. Are not to enter staff-only areas. So again, this is the negative, are not to, which means visitors must not enter staff-only areas. So you'll see this in like formal kind of regulations or formal rules, like school rules, university rules, test-taking rules, maybe company rules as well. Contracts, legal stuff too. So are not to or is not to, depending on your subject. Okay, so let's take a look at the next one then. Another kind of similar pattern. Here we'll see no, something, is or are to be plus the past participle verb. So we see this same to be pattern that we saw here. But we'll use this to talk about like something we cannot do, or we'll use this to talk about like an object or some kind of noun phrase at the beginning here. So let's take a look at some examples. It's kind of hard to imagine. Here's one. No food is to be brought into the theater. No food is to be brought into the theater. This means don't bring food to the theater. Here, so we begin with no, and then this is the thing that I'm like banning in this case. I'm saying don't bring this thing. So no food is to be brought into the theater. So, okay, I'll introduce one more example and then explain why we might use something like this. Let's follow this up with phones are to be turned off. So in this sentence, I removed no. So we might not begin with no. So phones, plural, are to be turned off. So here again, are to be, and my verb, turned off. So why would we use this? You notice here, there's no person involved. Like in my other examples, I said you or visitors, whatever. Please remove your shoes, for example. In these sentences though, there's no person, there's no actor. So it's kind of like soft in that you're not actually saying who, like who is this rule for? You don't say like, please, you should not bring something in, as we'll talk about later. But this sounds a bit more formal, and there's no like guidelines for exactly who this rule is meant for. So this sounds kind of stiff, kind of formal, and we would use this in like public spaces. So like this example is common for a movie theater or another like concert hall type space. So this means it applies to everyone in general. So this can mean visitors, it can mean guests, it can mean people just moving through the building. So this applies to everybody. So you'll see this to be pattern in more formal situations and for kind of more like legal rules. Okay, let's move along to the next one. The next two actually both use this word prohibited. Let's look at the sentence first. Here I've used guests. Guests are prohibited from something ing. So we'll use this ing form of a verb here. Guests are prohibited from ing. Depending on where you live, you may see this used as prohibited to, and then the dictionary form of the verb. Guests are prohibited to do something. In my research, I found that from and the ing form tends to be a little bit more common, but I have seen that both are used, so for your information. But how do we use this? For example, guests are prohibited from using the pool. So we see this commonly, I used guests here because we see this commonly for hospitality situations. We might see it in like a hotel or when using a building, a facility of some kind, or perhaps we would see it on like an airplane, like passengers maybe too could be applicable here. So guests are prohibited from using the pool. This part, are prohibited from, means guests, this part right here, guests cannot, is what this means. Guests cannot use the pool. That's what this means. So prohibited is a strong word. It's a strong word that means you cannot do something. Prohibited from doing something. So let's look at another pattern now. This one uses prohibited from using. Let's see another way to use prohibited. This one. Something something is or are, depending on your subject, strictly prohibited. Strictly prohibited. So in this case, instead of using a person as the subject here, we'll use some kind of noun phrase, like an object. So here's an example. Photos are strictly prohibited. This is a very common example. So photos, taking pictures. Photos, plural, photos are strictly prohibited. So strictly means like we're very strong about this rule. Strictly prohibited means photos are something that absolutely must not be taken. You absolutely must not take photos. Photos are strictly prohibited. Another example, entering the temple. Here I have a noun phrase. Entering the temple is, so this is a singular noun phrase, is strictly prohibited. You absolutely must not enter the temple. So strictly prohibited you can understand as absolutely must not. So a very strong rule. So pay attention to this when you are traveling. If you see something that says prohibited or strictly prohibited, it means you should be really, really careful not to do that thing. Okay, let's continue on to some more grammar points. Let's go back to some grammar. I've got the next one in parentheses here. It's not so much a pattern, just a reminder. We can use command form for rules. So the command form typically makes very short, quick sentences, but they're very clear. They're very direct though, so please be careful. These are useful in like guidelines, or if you're talking maybe to like students, or you just need to communicate very quickly and effectively. You can use command form. Examples, go to the lobby, pick up your ID card. So you notice here there's no please or we ask that you or students must, nothing like that. We've just got this very short, quick command form verb. So this is just the simple present tense. So go to the lobby, pick up your ID card. These sound direct. So they're useful when talking about rules or when giving someone directions too. Okay, one more that's similar here. Subject should verb. So this is a very open pattern for sure. Let's look at examples. What do I mean here? Students is my subject. Students should be at school by 9. Students says my subject. Should be is my verb. Students should be at school by 9. So this means it's like students ought to be. So it's best if students are at school by 9. So should sounds a little bit soft. So in most cases, in other words, students should be at school by 9, but perhaps there are some cases where students are not at school by 9. This is kind of like a soft rule. We should try to follow the rule, though there may be some exceptions, perhaps. One more example. Customers should make a line. Customers should make a line. This is something you might see at a retail store or department store, for example. So customers should make a line. Again, this is kind of like a soft suggestion for a rule. Like you won't get in trouble, customers will not get in trouble if they do not make a line, but it's a good idea too. Like it's best for everybody to do this thing. So you'll see this should for kind of softer rules. Okay, let's look at the last two here. Very similar. I'll read them together actually. First is avoid plus a verb in the ing form. Avoid ing. and refrain from something something ing. Again, the same verb form. These both mean please don't. Please don't do this thing. Let's look at the examples first. Avoid running in the halls. Avoid running in the halls. And refrain from taking photos. Okay, so I said that these both mean please don't, but there are some small differences between these. Avoid doesn't actually mean please don't. It means as much as possible, please don't. So in this case, running in the halls is the activity that we're saying please avoid. So that means as much as possible, do not run in the halls. If maybe there's an emergency, someone might run, okay, perhaps, but avoid it. Avoid running in the halls. Try not to do this thing as much as possible. This one, however, refrain from. Refrain from. This one means do not. Do not take photos. Refrain from taking photos means do not take photos. Refrain from sounds more polite than do not take photos. So these are a quick maybe reference, I guess, a quick reference list for some rules, some expressions related to rules. When you travel, please pay attention to these kinds of things. So these are often posted at like travel spots or places that tourists like to visit a lot. You'll see them in hospitality situations, hotels, airplanes, and so on. So do pay attention. Please do pay attention to these rules because they can help you, better communicate and work together with the people in that area, wherever you're visiting or wherever you're staying. So this is a quick reference point. I hope that it's helpful for you. Of course, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to let us know in the comment section of this video. Also, if you like the video, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel if you haven't already, and check us out at EnglishClass101.com for some other things that can help you with your English studies. Thanks very much for watching this lesson, and I will see you again soon. Bye!